Welcome everyone. Welcome to my Mise and Seasonal Roots collaboration. I've been working with Seasonal Roots for a while now, maybe almost a year and a half, 2 years.
I think so. I think that sounds right.
Yeah. So I'm really excited that we're doing another of our free cooking classes. We'll call it an early fall cooking class using the wonderful ingredients for any of you who got this week's bundle in their delivery. If you're curious and want to know more about Seasonal Roots and what they offer and how you too can start to get your weekly delivery, there's the code when you signed up. It's Mise en Place, and you can just go on to the Seasonal Roots and you get the free membership, which is fantastic. I have to say, I love going to my farmer's market, but I don't always have the time to do that. Whether it's sports with the kids or I just have other things going on. This way, the thing that I personally like about Seasonal Roots, not only does it come straight from the farmer's market, from the farmers to my doorstep, is that they come in a different variety of bundles, plus you can customize your bundle, plus you can skip a week if you're going to be out of town. You can add more things, everything from dairy, cheeses, eggs, obviously your produce, your fresh produce, meats, salsas. What they offer just grows and grows and grows. And I just find it really nice and refreshing to have this wonderful basket or bag of goodies at my doorstep ready for the weekend. So if you're someone who does a lot of batch cooking and gets a lot of cooking done over the weekend, this is the place to go. It is unlike any other subscription service, and you're really supporting your local vendors and producers and farmers, as well as our, Seasonal Roots veggie fairies who come and deliver it straight to your doorstep. They're all just wonderful people. So I'm really excited to be able to offer these classes, just really showcasing everything they have. And if you did get the bundle, you will notice that my shopping list for our menu this evening, which is, you have a main dish, you have a side dish, you have a salad, and then you have a dessert. So your shopping list is very, very small, and it's probably things that you may already have in your kitchen, which is fantastic. So the first thing we're going to start with is the Acorn Squash with the savory apple stuffing. Now, the term mise en place is a French term that means all things in its place. So you will want to make sure that we have all of our ingredients chopped and prepped and cleaned and ready to go before we start assembling our dish. All the way from having our oven preheated and ready to cook these squash to having our croutons done. I already have my eggs beaten, slightly beaten. I've cut up my apples. I've cut up my celery. And now I'm going to show you a great technique on how to cut an onion. But that is what the term mise en place means, getting all of your things ready and prepped and ready to go so that when you are cooking, it just makes it a lot easier. That was the reason why I thought it was a great name for a business, for a cooking business, because we want to show you how you too can get all of your mise in place. And I know from working in very, very busy New York City restaurants, when those first tickets come in and it's a Friday night and you're doing over 300 covers, if you don't have all of your ingredients ready and those tickets start coming in, the rest of your night is terrible. So it's very similar to at home, where if you're missing an ingredient, if you didn't prepare something the right way and you put it into a hot saute pan before it's supposed to go in, it just throws the whole cooking experience off. So, let's get started with our mise en place. So for the acorn squash, obviously we want to cut the acorn squash in half. Now, the recipe says to cut it in half lengthwise. I did one of each. If you are serving this, well, we eat with our eyes first. So I'm going to edit that recipe a little bit because I did both. I cut my acorn squash in half lengthwise, and it gave me, these nice long pieces. But then I thought, well, it only makes sense to cut it in half crosswise in the middle, because then the two ends can kind of sit up, whereas when you cut it in half lengthwise, they're a little bit uneven. So what I did was that I just cut off one end, the bottom of the squash, to make it flat. And I cut it in half, and you have this beautiful flower shape when you cut it in half this way, and it sits right up. And I thought, wow, if you're serving this as, say, either a side dish, or even for someone who's vegetarian, if you're having this as a meal, maybe you are tossing a little bit of, the tempeh crumbles in there to give it a little bit more protein. How pretty is this to have this on your plate, nice and roasted? I just thought, I think for presentation, this way is a lot prettier. So what I did was I went ahead and I cut those in half, brushed a little bit of olive oil, or if you have olive oil spray those, season them with salt and pepper. I have a little bit of parchment on my baking sheet, and I'm going to turn these over flesh side down on the parchment paper. And I'm going to go ahead and put those in the oven, because we are going to put those in the oven so that the flesh of the squash bakes while we make the stuffing. We will be putting them back in there, but just long enough to cook the eggs in our breading, in our stuffing. So these, put them in there and cook them for about 20 minutes. They don't need to be completely soft and mushy, because we want them to have some structure. So just go ahead and put them in your 425-degree oven. Middle shelf is perfect. Not 2 hours, I don't need 2 hours. All right. Now, while those are cooking, here's our time management. We're gonna go ahead and we're gonna make that savory stuffing. So I've already gone ahead and made our croutons with that wonderful boule, that round loaf of La Brea Bakery, the Belvita Bakery, which is just delicious. I mean, if you tried this just on its own, I actually toasted the ends of the bread while this was baking, and I made a little sandwich out of it during lunch. Just wonderful sourdough bread. And the fruit, again, something that you can do with, if you have a loaf of bread that's about to go. Of course, this was nice and fresh, so it crisped really, really well. I tossed it with a little bit of olive oil, salt and pepper. And I also added a little bit of that fresh thyme. So for those of you who got the bundle, you got a wonderful bundle of fresh herbs. I just added a little bit of thyme leaves in here just to give it a little extra flavor. So I'll put those aside, because now we want to get that bread is so delicious. And even just the olive oil makes it taste buttery, which, hey, we're using olive oil instead of butter. That's a little bit better, I guess. Health-wise, but it's fresh. It's fresh right at your doorstep. So you don't have to go to a lot of different stores to get all of these wonderful ingredients. So for this, we have our chopped onion and our chopped apple. Now I went ahead and I kept the skin on my apple. For a stuffing, I like the extra fiber. I don't mind the taste of the skin. That's a complete preference for you. Certain dishes I did peel. For the salad, I peeled the apples. I believe I peeled the apples. I peeled the apples for the fennel. And I did not cut the apples for the salad or the dessert yet. One thing I did do with the apples, and Isabella, you may laugh at me, but because in the bundle we got 9 apples, and I thought, okay, I don't know if I really know the difference between all of these apples. So if you go on to, if you look on the Apple website, if you go to, I believe these are from Saunders Farm, If you go onto the website, if you go onto Seasonal Roots, you can find pictures of the apples. And so the ones that I'm gonna peel, I actually put I wrote on them. Which one is which? I did do a taste test. I did a taste test, and oh my goodness, and I believe these are the Honey Crisp, right? We weren't sure if we were gonna have Honey Crisp or Pink Ladies.
Right, but the Honey Crisp for this one, though, you're right.
The Honey Crisp are so floral.
Right, okay.
These are fantastic. The Piney Gold does, if you're familiar with like a Golden Delicious, it has that similar taste, and they are green. But yeah, I had to write on them, and I was looking at pictures, and I put them together, and I was looking at shape. But of course, I also did a taste test too, because that's important too. But yeah, I just wrote on them, so I knew which was which. But a lot of these apples are interchangeable. The one thing that is a little bit more relevant in terms of the apples is that the Jana Gold are good for baking. So that's why we're using that in the dessert. But the Piney River Gold really stand up, and they're a little bit tart, but boy, they're delicious. So our mise en place, as I keep talking, we have a little bit of butter, salt and pepper. Also in the bundle, we had fresh sage. So instead of using dried sage, I doubled the amount because dried is concentrated. So you only have dried, use the amount, what is it, 3/4 of a teaspoon, use that amount in your recipe. But if you're using this bundle with this fresh sage, I chopped up about 3 leaves to use that fresh sage. You know, stuffing, sage, you think Thanksgiving, how perfect is that? I'm also gonna use some of this rosemary too, because it's nice and soft, which means it's young and fresh. Now, our mise en place calls for a chopped onion. This was one of the things that that you probably have in your pantry. So here's our first technique, how to chop an onion. So, you know, your onion is round, which can be dangerous in itself, trying to cut a round onion. And it has a stem end and a root end. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna cut off our stem end, and we're going to give ourselves a flat surface to work from. So we're gonna cut off that stem, we're gonna leave the root end on. Then we're gonna cut it right down the center through the root, and now you have 2 nice halves. It makes it really easy to take off the peel, that papery outer layer. Now this technique I learned in culinary school, and I've been using it ever since, because it helps keep all of that chopped onion on your cutting board. Not on the floor, not on the countertop, but contained on the cutting board. And I'll show you how. So now I have my onion. I have my root end on one end. I'm gonna take my knife, I'm gonna put the palm of my hand on top of my onion, and I'm gonna cut through the center towards the root, but not all the way through. So if you look here, my knife is, I've cut into the onion, almost Pac-Man-like. So I've cut into the onion, but not all the way through. And I have one small little piece on my board. Now I'm going to make some more cuts. I'm gonna put my hand in a claw, tuck my thumb in, and I'm gonna cut straight down. But again, I'm not gonna cut all the way through the root. I'm just gonna do straight down cuts, maybe about a 1/2 inch apart. Keep that thumb tucked in. Believe you me, you don't wanna cut off the tip of your thumb. It hurts and it bleeds a lot. So we don't need that extra protein in our dish this evening. So now that I've made my cuts horizontally as well as straight down, now I'm going to go for the last cuts to make a really nice dice. I'm gonna put my thumb on the root end. I'm gonna curl my fingers and use those top knuckles as my guide. And again, just make straight cuts. Again, about a 1/2 inch apart, and this is gonna give you your nice dice. And everything stays together. Now, once you get down to this nub, I just chop around it, roughly chop around it. Again, we're making a stuffing. we're not garnishing with finely diced little onions. So I try and use as much as I can and just dice around it. But remember, tuck those fingers in. Your fingers are a lot more important than the onions are. And I'm just gonna put that in my bowl with my celery. And now I'm gonna do the other half. Well, how much do we need? How much onion do we need here? 2/3 cup. I'm gonna stop where I am because I used a very large onion. Now, while these are sauteing, I'm going to chop up my herbs and my rosemary. So what we want to do first is we want to melt our butter. So we should have, and you could certainly use olive oil. You could use vegan butter if you wanted to. You can use coconut oil. We're just going to saute those onions and celery for a little bit. You'll want to let that butter, cut it up a little bit. You'll want to let that butter melt. And then we're going to add the onion and celery. While my butter is melting, I'm going to chop up some of this wonderful rosemary, and I'm going to toss it in my bowl with my fresh sage. And I think I'm also going to add a surprise into my dessert. I am going to add some fresh thyme. Thyme and vanilla, they go so nice together. Thyme and apple, perfect. Here at Mise, we make a great, for one of our Italian classes, we make a rosemary polenta olive oil cake. And it's a dessert, but it's sweet, but not super sweet, not cake-like sweet. Very delicious. And again, I'm cooking with a gas cooktop, so my burner is on about a 6 right now. Oh, that rosemary just chopped so nicely. And a great way to keep, if you don't use all of these herbs, a great way to keep them fresh is you can either wrap them in a damp paper towel and put them in a zip top bag or a little container, or you can even put them, if you have a small little, say like a jelly jar or a ball glass, you can put a little bit of water in there and just keep their stems in the water, and that will keep them nice and fresh too. All right, so now I can hear that my butter is bubbling. I'm going to add in my onions and my celery and give those a nice saute. And just give those a quick toss. If you haven't already chopped up your garlic, now is a good time to chop up your garlic. It's about 6 cloves, so it'll have a punch, but we're cooking the garlic, right? So it won't be really, really sharp like raw garlic. And we're just going to let those cook. Now, if you are still working on your prep, you can go ahead and chop up your apples. Again, I kept my peel on. I had a really large Piney River apple, and it's delicious. I'm glad I cut up the large one because I've been snacking on it. So we're just looking for a little bit of translucent here, which means your onions will turn a nice pale yellow. A little bit of color is fine. A little bit of a golden color is fine. This is an 8-inch pan. I probably should have used a 10-inch pan, but just for a little bit more surface area, but this is fine. Should smell like the holidays. And this is definitely a great side dish for the holidays. Or again, if you have someone that's coming that is vegetarian, This is a wonderful vegetarian dish. And I hope that we have some people. Isabella, do you know if we have anyone that got the bundles with the tempeh?
We did. There were a few substitutions for those.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
They're a wonderful family. The folks from Chaotic Tempeh, they're a great family. And they really, I'm so excited that they are making now these crumbles. Their pieces of tempeh, again, great. I don't know how to cook tempeh. I've had it before in other places. I am not a vegan, but I'm always willing to try. And their tempeh takes a couple of steps. So it's not just warming it up. You do have to cook it and bake it, but the crumbles are really just a quick cook that will be perfect in it as a substitute for our sausage. So I'm excited. I'm excited that people are trying it, and I can't wait to hear how they like it. All right, so our onions and our celery, and it's smelling wonderful. Now I'm going to add my garlic. Now I did not add the garlic with the onions and celery because the garlic cooks a lot faster and it's tiny, tiny pieces. So you certainly don't want to have any burned, garlic there. So that's another thing you have to think about when you're cooking in stages. You always put in the things that need to cook the longest first, and then you add in those that are a little quicker. Now I'm going to add my sage and my fresh sage and my fresh rosemary. Okay, I am now going to shut that off and let that slightly cool. Now, in the meantime, I have my big bowl of croutons. I have my apples. I have my eggs. And I have a little bit of broth. I have a little bit of extra boxed broth that I'm using, but I do at home. I love to use a product called Better Than Bouillon. It comes in a jar, and it's a concentrated base. So you can get everything from chicken to no chicken to vegetable to beef, turkey, ham. It's delicious whenever you just need a little bit of flavor into your dish. And the nice thing is that it comes in a jar. 1 teaspoon of the base gives you 1 cup of liquid. When I'm making greens, I toss it in there. I get a lot of greens from my seasonal roots. So if I don't get to them all at once, if I don't get to them in time and they're starting to look a little soft, I'll put all of my greens in an Instapot, a little bit of water, maybe about 1/3 cup of water, a spoonful of the Better Than Bouillon, and set it to 0. And it makes the best greens. But that's my broth base of choice. And it's usually good for about a year, which is fantastic, or 2 years. All right, so I have a couple of tablespoons of broth. I'm just going to put 1 in now with my eggs. So what we're mixing in now, first, I'm going to toss my eggs with my croutons. So I beat the eggs just slightly just to break up the yolks. I'm going to give that a toss. I'm going to add my apples. And give that a toss. Now, one step, as I'm looking at the recipe, I don't tell you when to add in the onion mixture. So we don't want to have that sitting there for nothing. Now I'm going to go ahead and add my sauteed onions and celery and garlic and all those wonderful herbs. So if you're cooking along, it should smell really, really good. And I'm going to give that a stir. You want to mix that really well. And let it sit for a minute before you add any more broth. I'm going to give it a season with a little bit of salt and pepper. Yeah, and I know for me, I added 1 tablespoon of broth. I don't think I need to add any more because I can already feel my croutons starting to get a little soft. Now, throughout this class, please do not hesitate to ask any questions. Feel free to unmute yourself. Ideally, my iPad is about 6 feet away from me, so it's not always easy for me to read the chat, but I know Isabella can certainly look at the chat too. You know, she's here from Seasonal Roots and she can take a look and see, you know, if anyone has any questions. But this class is for you. If I'm going too fast, if you need me to repeat something, please interrupt me and tell me to slow down. And also, just quickly, a big congratulations to Seasonal Roots as being one of the top 25 fastest growing companies. So congratulations, that's pretty amazing. All right, I'm gonna let that sit. I am gonna give it a little bit, I might as well get all that egg in. I'm gonna give it a little bit of salt and pepper. And while that sits, I can check on my acorn squash because that's what I hear going off. All right, now let's see. All right. So obviously you want to be very, very careful. And a great way to test to see, you know, how soft they are is to just pierce the skin. And this feels still a little tough. Let me flip it over. Now it doesn't need to be cooked all the way because we are going to fill it and put it back in the oh, it looks so pretty. And they smell so nice. Yeah, I definitely like cutting them straight through the center so they have that almost sunburst, let's see. Those are nice. I think I'm gonna let mine bake for, I'm gonna put them back in there for, oh, you know what? I'm gonna fill them. Now, if you have oh yeah, I'm definitely gonna fill it. If you have a cookie scoop, now is the best time to use that big cookie scoop because this is a great way to fill those squashes. So my stuffing, nice and wet. So I'm going to take a nice scoop. Really get that. Now, if you have any extra, I have a feeling I'm gonna have some extra, I'm just gonna bake it. This would be great for brunch. Oh my goodness, like stuffing egg cups. Yeah, if you have extra, you can also put it in a muffin tin. I'm just gonna bake it. But when you cut them in half across the middle, now you'll want to make sure that you have a very sharp knife and be very careful when cutting these acorn squash. You know, they have a thick, sturdy skin. So what I do is that I'll make a cut in the middle and I'll hold it down and I'll bring my knife down to the cutting board. I try and split it a little bit. These are gonna look so nice. All right. Yeah, so I have quite a bit of stuffing left over. Now, would I freeze this stuffing? I would maybe bake it and then freeze it. But with the raw egg, I'm not sure if I would, I don't know how it, I'm not a big fan of freezing something that has all this raw egg in it. You may want to, if you wanted to bake it in a freezer safe dish, and then when you go to reheat it, add a little bit more stock. That would probably be. All right, so back in the oven for about 10 to 15 minutes, and the top will get nice and brown. All right. Great. All right, so that's dish one. I'll give everybody a couple of minutes. Our next dish, or whatever time you may need. The next dish that we're going to do is the fennel sausage with beer, apples, and onions. And again, we'll slice up some onions, but we're gonna slice them up a little different. Now, if you don't want to use beer, you can certainly just use that same bit of broth that you used before in our stuffing. I have a nice big saute pan here. Now for this, I mixed my apples. So whatever I had extra, I want to say I used 1 Piney River and 1 Piney River. I think I used 1 Honey Crisp and 1 John Gould. I mixed them up. So for this, we have our sliced apples. I am using some of the Mayor Meats sausage. Their sausage is delicious. So for those of you who got them, I already took, you can use a toothpick or a skewer or a fork, and I already made some holes in the casing. That's just to keep them from exploding. And you may laugh, but yes, I mean explode. So for this, we need, I'll just go over the ingredients and certainly let me know if you have any questions. Caraway seeds and fennel seeds. Now, if you have one and not the other, just keep to the same amount. 1 teaspoon is fine. It just gives a little bit more of a earthy, it reminds me of a lot of German spices. You know that caraway is like a rye bread taste. Fennel seeds, which is your anise. Salt, pepper, 1 large onion, and we just want half moon slices. So I'll show you what that is. Our apples, peeled, cored, and thinly sliced. Now, I will show you how I thinly slice my apples, you know, how I cut my apple to thinly slice it. Everyone may have their own way of doing it, but I'll certainly show you how I did it. Some bay leaves, 1 can of English ale. Now Mise en Place, this year we have, for any of our classes or events that we host here, we have a really nice beverage program. So we just added these wonderful beers from Nost Brewing Project. It's part of Ouzelfinch, which is in Fort Monroe, which has a lovely little neighborhood of breweries. So their head brewer, Rachel Howard, started the Nost Brewing Project. And this is actually a Hefeweizen that I'm using for mine. It's got a little bit of citrus notes to it. The labels in the cans are just gorgeous. But if you get a chance to go to Fort Monroe, Ouzelfinch is the main umbrella. They have their own beers, and then Nost is a separate brewing project within Ouzelfinch. But you know, we're gonna make it as Virginia as we can for our, as local as we can for our dinner. So I have my fennel sausages. Again, I lightly, you know, poked those. Our bay leaves, some vermouth. I didn't have any vermouth on hand. I used a little bit of dry sherry. It's really just, we're just gonna cook out the alcohol. It's for a little extra, almost smoky, like barbecue-ish. Some ketchup and some melted butter. So the first thing, and I do have some of my butter melting, perfect. And I'm gonna mix together. And that may have been omitted too in the recipe as I was looking at it myself. The vermouth, the ketchup, and the melted butter can all be blended together. And that's just gonna make our sauce. That'll just make our sauce. In the meantime, if you happen to have a mortar and pestle, if you happen to have an extra coffee grinder or a coffee grinder to grind your coffee beans, that is perfect to use for your caraway and fennel seeds. I happen to have a really nice mortar and pestle, so I just kind of ground them up a little bit. If you don't have a coffee grinder, you don't have a mortar and pestle, you can just put it in a tiny little zip top bag and use either an empty bottle. You can use a mallet, you could use a rolling pin, and just to break up those seeds. That's all we're doing here, is we're just breaking up those seeds. So I have my sliced apples. Now for our onions. So I have half an onion. You'll want to cut the onion in half, just like I showed you earlier. And for this, we just want half moon circles. So again, I put my thumb on the root end, I curl my fingers, and I use this the top digits just as my guide. And I'm just gonna make some half moon. And again, as I get closer, if my fingernails, which I don't really have fingernails, can't hold it anymore, I stop. You know, the ends you can always save if you're someone who makes their own stock, whether it's vegetable or chicken stock. You can always just throw these in a zip top bag and freeze them if you want to, or compost. So the first thing we're going to do for this, again, I have probably like a 3-inch, this is a big 12-inch saute pan that has some good sides to it. Because we are adding liquid, you do want something with a little bit of some sides. A Dutch oven works great, like an enamel covered cast iron pan, something similar. Something similar to this is perfect. something nice and deep and heavy, you could certainly use that if you wanted to. So I'm heating up my pan. I'm going to add in my vegetable oil. Now, for this, we just need, how much vegetable oil did I say? Probably about a tablespoon or so of vegetable oil. Now, when you're adding oil to a pan, so my pan is heating up, I just added my oil. Oil, vegetable oil, avocado oil, olive oil, it's all has a thickness to it. It has a little bit of viscosity. So if any of you are wine drinkers and when you swirl your wine, you see those legs, that's the viscosity. Oil has the same thing. It has those kind of shimmery legs. When you've warmed up your oil enough and it moves around your pan like water, it's really, really fluid and it's no longer has that thickness to it. That's when your oil is ready to add whatever protein you're going to add in. You want to make sure that you're cooking on the fat and that you're not putting your protein in and then pouring the oil around it where your protein. So if ever you've tried to saute chicken breasts and they've stuck to the pan and they end up being shredded, it's because your pan and your oil weren't hot enough before you added the protein. And that should be your method. So you should heat up the pan, heat up the oil, then add in your protein. So now I'm going to go ahead. I see that my oil is nice and hot. I actually used a little bit of garlic oil because we had made some roasted garlic earlier. Now I'm just putting these in here until they're brown all around. So I'm going to get myself a pair of tongs. And this won't take long. So in the meantime, if you need to slice up those onions or slice up your apples, now is the time to do it. Make sure you have a little tray handy. Watch out for spatters. And to make sure that they don't stick to the pan, just give them a quick toss. I actually have a spatter gun. I bought one of these from IKEA years and years ago. Because we put it away, we never use it, but now is a good time to use it. So you'll want to have your apples and your onions ready. So I have my apples sliced. I just peeled them in here. I'll give a quick apple demonstration. So what I do is I cut one side. And then again, I have a nice flat side. So I just cut around the core. And I just keep turning it. And that's it. Makes it really easy. And if you have an apple core, great. For me, in my home, I don't have a lot of space. So that's just one less gadget. If you can just use your knife. And then you already have that nice flat base. Go ahead and slice up your apples. And we'll want to make sure that they're nice and brown on all sides. See when I turn, oh my goodness, they smell so good, even just on their own.
So we will be taking them out of the pan, leaving all of that little bit of fat and juices in there. So if you have the tempeh, you can go ahead and saute that too in the oil, take it out, and then we'll add our apples and our onions right back in there. I had half a red onion that I wanted to use up, so I mixed that in there as well. If you have a couple of shallots that are looking like they're ready to go, this is the perfect dish to add all those things. All right. Mine are nice and sauteed. Now, don't worry if you're afraid that the sausages may not be cooked all the way through. They don't need to be. We are going to be putting those back in the pan. So you should have a little bit of fond, so maybe a little bit of kind of brown crispy bits at the bottom of your pan. That's fine. So go ahead and remove the sausages. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and add the onions right to those juices. And my cooktop is on about a 5, so about a medium high. Oh, more medium really. All right, so I've added my onions, my apples, and just toss those around. And this we just want to saute until the onions are nice and soft. Plus the apples will release some of their own natural juices too. Oh, that may be my squash. All right, let's see. Oh my goodness, they look great. Where did I put all my gloves? Here it is. So the tops of my squash are nice and brown and golden. I don't want to dump them all out. They smell great. The stuffing has gotten a little bit toasty. I'm going to put that aside. We'll try one of those later. And my side dish of stuffing looks great too. Now this, again, this on its own makes a great stuffing or dressing for your holidays. So that is nice and the top is crispy, but the inside is still soft. So I'm going to put that aside. It smells like fall. Now, if you're using the same onion, if you're using the same oven for your dessert and your squash is all done, you can go ahead and lower your oven temp to 325. All right, my onions are getting nice and soft. Now, before I add the bay leaves, I'm going to go ahead and add my crushed caraway and fennel seeds.
This too is a perfect Oktoberfest. Give that a toss. I can tell, I can feel with my, with the tongs that the apples are starting to get a little soft as well too. All right. So now I'm going to go ahead and add my bay leaves. So fresh or dried bay leaves are great. I'm going to add my broths right back in there. And any juice that is in the pan that they were sitting in, add those. I am going to add my beer. So this is 12 ounces. Yay for Nost Brewing because their cans are 16 ounces. So that means that the cook gets 4 ounces. So cheers. But this is Nost Brewing Lady. This is their Hefeweizen. So this is about 12 ounces, so about a cup and a half. Now, if you didn't want to use beer, you could just use broth. You could use apple juice, vegetable broth, or chicken broth. I certainly would not, I probably would not use beef broth. Okay, now what we need to do is lower the heat and cover. So I'm gonna move that over to another burner and just let that simmer. I'm gonna do that for probably about 7 minutes, just enough to make sure that the broths are cooked. And yes, it's okay to take one out, cut it in half, and make sure that they're cooked all the way through. And that's what we want. So you can just lower your heat. I'm gonna go get one of my covers. And we'll cover that up and let that simmer. And right now we're just sort of steaming. Because a lot of our cookware is restaurant supply cookware, not every saute pan has a cover, but I do have this, I don't even know where this came from. I have like this Captain America shield cover that I like to use, works perfectly. There are some companies now that make a universal cover. They're a silicone cover. Those are wonderful. I have one of those at home. So you can use it for all size pans. Because it's silicone, it almost kind of suctions a little bit to your pan. So you won't get that extra dripping of steam. Like for this pan, it's really too big for the pan. It works, but again, it's a little too big. So this we're just gonna let simmer. In the meantime, you'll want to mix your, this is my butter, my ketchup, and this is my dry cherry because I didn't have any vermouth, but if you have vermouth, you can use a little gin in there too if you wanted to. That will give it that little juniper essence. And that will just help thicken it. Okay, does anyone have any questions so far before we move on to our dessert, to the cake? So I'm making mine in a cast iron. What I'm going to do now is I have not yet sliced my apples for the cake. So I'm just gonna wipe down my cutting board since I did cut onions on here. Wipe down my cutting board, my knife, and I'll get those apples sliced now and let them sit. This one has the J, so I know it's the apple that I need for my dessert. But I do another nice thing about getting your fruits and vegetables, your produce from seasonal roots. is that you don't really have to worry about those stickers that are almost impossible to come off. Some products, of course, they're avocados, but they have a decomposable sticker. But down here, when we compost in the commercial compost, they're trying to, I think a lot of companies are trying to find a way that they could use some sort of stamp, something that is not ink, that is food friendly. You know, most of it is all just for barcode, you know, for barcodes when you're at the grocery store. But it's nice to just be able to give them a quick wipe down and not worry about trying to get those darn stickers off. So this is one of my favorite peelers. It is just a nice flat peeler versus the regular standard peelers. I like this one because it's pretty universal for both hands. I know that sounds silly, but I am a lefty, and 99% of knives that are made, especially Eastern, like any of my Japanese knives, none of them are forged for left-handers. They're all, the blade is all forged for right-handed people. And if I want a really good Japanese knife for a lefty, it's like 1.5 times. It's pure discrimination, but it's like 1.5 times the cost. Fortunately, there are some good local knife makers here in town. So I think at some point I may get myself my own knife, but the flat ones seem to be pretty universal for both ways. Sometimes I have the weirdest times trying to cut things using different tools. Now, if you wanted to do this ahead of time, you know, to keep your apple from browning, obviously, you put it in a little bit of acidulated water. So maybe just a little bit of water with a little bit of a touch of lemon juice in it. And that's all. Now you can bake apple skins, add a little bit of cinnamon on there and bake some apple skins, almost like chips, like apple chips. Just leave it to the side. I wanted to say that. It's sorry, it's done. It's all right. It's not big. All right, so again, for this, because I am making a round cake in a cast iron, I'm going to do, I'm going to slice my apples thin, almost like I did for the sausages here. So again, I just make one cut right along the side of the core. One cut, and now that's giving me my flat side. Again, you're cutting something that's round. And I'm just going to go all the way around the core. Plate. For this, I'm just going to make nice thin slices. And I'll just put that aside. You know, for the other apples that I cut up, because they're being cooked, I didn't mind that they maybe oxidized a little bit. And it's really just oxygen. It's just the air. So it's not as if they're going bad right away. It's just the air. But for something like a salad or a dessert where you're going to see the apple in its best form, you really don't want to cut it too far ahead. But again, if you're trying to save time, you know, put it in a bowl, in a non-reactive bowl with a little bit of lemon water, just a little bit of acidulated water. And
Do you submerge the apple in the water, or just douse the apple with the water?
Sometimes I just toss it lightly in the acidulated water. I mean, you can keep it in there. It's not going to hurt it. But definitely keep it in the refrigerator. That way it'll stay cold and it won't absorb all that water.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so I have that set aside. I am going to take a quick look. Ooh, it's bubbling. It looks good, but I don't think my sausages are ready yet. Where are all my utensils? And also you can tell, if your sausages are done because they're pretty tight, they're not super, super soft. Oh my goodness, it smells so good. I've got to give it a good stir. And you really want to nestle those sausages down there into the juice. I'm just going to give them a couple more minutes, and then I'm going to go ahead and add this ketchup butter mixture to kind of thicken them up a little bit. And then we'll let it simmer for a little bit more. All right, so I have my apples sliced for my cake. Now, before we put our whole cake together, we're gonna bring all the ingredients over here. These lily bean mixes are very good. I've given these as gifts, especially to friends of mine that have children that really have a lot of allergies. This is soy-free, vegan, dairy-free, gluten-free, and no artificial color. It's really difficult to find a baking mix that are free of all of these things. This, again, I give these as gifts. So it sounds silly, but there's nothing worse than having a child who can't go to kids' birthday parties because they can't have a cake or a cupcake. This is the perfect solution to make sure that they can still feel included. But this is also a great base for our dessert. So this is our semi-homemade dessert. And yes, I am adding eggs and milk to mine, but if you look on the bag, it gives you the alternatives. Eggs are optional. You can use dairy-free milk substitute. So an almond milk, cashew milk, an oat milk, whatever works in your family is perfect for that. So she has both your regular recipe as well as a vegan preparation, which I really do. I know a lot of people appreciate, really, really appreciate. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make our topping. Now I am going to gift some of this cake to a very good friend of mine who is gluten-free. So we're going to start off with that gluten-free crumble topping. Now I'm going to use a little bit of olive oil in mine. Now, of course, you can use butter, but I'm going to go with the olive oil. But before I do that, I'm sorry if I'm jumping around. Before I do that, I'm going to do the one last bit for our sausage. This is the ketchup, this is the melted butter, and this is the vermouth or sherry or gin, whatever you may use. And now I'm just going to let that simmer. Really, I'm going to let that simmer uncovered for another 10 minutes or so, just so that that sauce thickens up a little bit. But it smells so delicious. All right. So here I have my topping mixture. I have my gluten-free flour. I have 3 tablespoons of brown sugar. I'm using some light brown sugar, but dark brown sugar is absolutely fine. A little bit of cinnamon, a pinch of salt. Now, I'll use for baking, that's when I use my table salt, my iodized salt, the really, really fine salt. When I am cooking, so when I am adding salt to the sausage dish, the squash dish, I use, of course, either sea salt or a kosher salt. I like to be able to feel how much salt I'm adding to a dish. I also always use an unsalted butter because I like to control the amount of salt. Salt is one of those ingredients where if you add too much, you can't take away. So even for a dessert, I will measure maybe over, I won't pour it. I won't pour it into the measuring cup or the measuring spoon over my bowl. That's just too risky. We once had a group years ago, and for the life of me, I have no idea how it happened, but we do a lot of corporate team building, cooking classes down here. And we had a dessert, and instead of adding sugar, they added salt. Don't ask, I have no idea how it happened. The dessert was horrible. It was disgusting. So always taste if you're not sure, give it a little taste. Otherwise, I tend to just use you can certainly use a coarse salt for your desserts. Just know that a pinch is probably maybe about half a pinch. So I have my cinnamon, I have my cinnamon, I have my brown sugar, I have my flour, I have my pinch of salt. I have a little cup of the sliced almonds that I am going to add. And now I'm just going to add 2 tablespoons of oil and give that a mix. And this is our topping. Now, of course, you can use butter too. And then I'll put that aside. So this is just our topping. And it should be nice and crumbly, just as if you were making an oat topping. If you wanted to add some oats in here, you could certainly do that too. And it makes a really nice crumbly topping. Who doesn't like a crumb cake crumb topping with brown sugar and cinnamon? And that's the best. That's almost I don't say that's the best part, but it is a really good part. All right. Now in my larger bowl, I have my eggs. In my larger bowl, I have my cinnamon. So this is 1 tablespoon of ground cinnamon. Now I'm going to add my dry lily bean vanilla cake mix. Just add that whole thing in there. That smells good. I'm just going to blend those together. And this is, you'll want to blend it with a fork or with a whisk, just to break up any of those clumps. Now I'm going to add my eggs, my milk, and my oil. I just used a canola oil. Now I'm breaking up those eggs. I'm going to pour that right in here. And nobody needs to know that it's semi-homemade. I certainly won't tell. But these make great cupcakes. They make a nice cake. And I'm going to make mine in a cast. Now you'll really want to make sure that all those dry ingredients that sometimes form on the bottom of your pan are mixed in well. Okay. Now I'm going to get my pan. So I have this nice cast iron pan. Again, I'm going to use a spatula, give it a nice stir. Pour that in. There we go. I'm going to take my sliced apples and press them down a little bit. Just so that when the cake bakes, the batter kind of comes up and nestles those pieces of apples right in. Now this week, I also got, in addition to the bundle, I got some beautiful Asian pears. Those can also be used interchangeably with a lot of the dishes that we're making tonight, especially the cake. Okay, so I did that. I pressed them down just slightly. I'm going to sprinkle with a little bit of the almonds. I don't mind if the almonds get into the cake. A little bit of almonds. Now I'm going to go ahead and add that crumble topping. So you want to try and get a little bit all around. You don't want big clumps of the topping in one place. You want to make sure there's a little bit of topping in every bite, every fork.
How big is your cast iron pan there? How wide?
So this one is a big pan. This one
Looks like it.
This one is probably about 12 inches. So my cake is not going to be thick. It'll probably be about 2 inches high.
Okay.
I think like if you have a regular cake pan, like an 8-inch or 9-inch round cake pan would be great. I love making desserts. We also here, we do a lot of couples classes. And for that, if you were having, guests or hosting a dinner, you could do one of these little mini lodge pans for 2 people, right? These are about 6-inch.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. And I love those little cast iron pans, those lodge pans, especially because they can go from cooktop to table or oven to table. And now you can find them even in the camping section at Walmart. And a lot of them are pre-seasoned already, which is really nice.
Somebody asked if we don't want to use eggs, do we use oil? Did the package have another substitute?
They do. You just use 4 tablespoons of oil and vegan milk. So the eggs are completely optional.
Okay, perfect.
So you don't need to substitute them at all. Just leave them out. Yeah, and you can follow them on, and they're made, it's all made right here in Richmond. It's pastrybase.com. So Lily Bean is part of Pastry Base. So whether you follow them on Instagram or you go to their website, they have lots of great ideas.
We actually have a bundle this weekend that's by them. It's going to be festive hot chocolate bombs, the chocolates you make the mold to put in your hot chocolate, and a few pumpkin hot chocolate mixes as well. So very exciting.
Very exciting. All right, so in the oven it goes. And this shouldn't take long. About 20, 25 minutes. I'm gonna set mine on 15, just because mine is very thin. Well, not thin, but it's not thick. So I guess it's not very thin, but it's not really thick. All right. All right, so at this point, my sausages are cooked through and look delicious. My squash, you could probably cook down, my sauce is still a little bit thick. So if you wanted to have, or my sauce is a little thin, sorry. If you wanted to have a thicker sauce, you can certainly let it simmer. Take out the sausages and let it simmer a little bit more. But oh my goodness, this looks delicious, especially if you had it over maybe some egg noodles would be really good too. So my acorn squash with the savory apple stuffing is done and out. My fennel sausages with apples and onions have all been sauteed. We put our apple cake in the oven. And that should be nice and warm and ready for dessert. And from dessert, we're gonna go to salad. Oh, and I meant to add some thyme in there and I didn't do that, but if you have that bundle, a little bit of fresh thyme in your apple cake would be delicious. Oh, maybe I'll top a little bit when it comes out. All right, and our last dish is our salad with this beautiful kale. So if you got the bundle, you got a big bunch of green kale and a big bunch of red kale with purple stems. So I took a little bit from each bunch to make the salad. Simple ingredients too. And kale is a tougher salad green. So you definitely need that acid and that oil to help soften and break down some of those cells. So for this, we just need a really nice little vinaigrette of some lemon juice. I did add a little bit of fresh thyme in here too. So this is just lemon juice, olive oil, and a little bit of salt. And I have a nice big salad bowl for that. I think I might add even a little bit more thyme in there. Thyme and apple go so well together too. Now, if you have the fresh thyme, you'll want to strip the leaves opposite of their growth direction, so sort of from the top down, and strip them off of the stem. Now, this is beautiful, nice young thyme. So if you still get a little bit of the stem at the end, that just means that it's soft and it's young and you can just chop it up. What you don't want is the woody, any of the kind of tougher stems in there. That's not what you want. But this is really beautiful thyme, and a lot of this will just chop right up. This also calls for some dates, some nice dried dates. Now, if you don't have dates, you can always use raisins. Of course, we do have some apples in there too, and those I am going to peel. No, and I guess I put I meant to put the toasted almonds in the salad, but I just went ahead and put them in the dessert. Toasted pecans would be really nice in here too, so you can certainly be creative. All right, I'm just gonna chop. So right now in my bowl, I have the lemon juice, olive oil, and salt. I added a little bit of fresh thyme. Now, if you don't have fresh thyme, but you wanted to use a dried herb, use half of the amount because your dried herbs are concentrated. So definitely put it into that olive oil and lemon mixture because they need to hydrate. They need to bloom in a liquid. Otherwise, your dried herbs taste like nothing. If ever you've gone to an event and you've had deviled eggs with dried chives on top, unfortunately, it does absolutely nothing for the flavor. It just tastes like paper. So you always want to make sure that those dried herbs are in some sort of liquid, or they're steamed or they're baked, something to bloom them back so that they do have some, you know, flavor in them. All right, so my kale. So what I like, since we're cutting them up into ribbons, what I do is I take my leaf of kale and I fold it in half with the seam side sticking out, almost like the spine of a book. And I just take my knife and I cut those thick stems out. The thick stems are just, you can certainly eat them, but they're very tough. So it's a lot of chewing. And then from that, I just line it up. It's still folded in half like a book. And I just cut thin ribbons. Now, if you have a salad spinner, that's exactly what you want to use to clean the kale. Our fruits and vegetables, again, are fresh from the farm. I love getting my potatoes because I could tell that they were just dug up. They still have dirt on them, which I am not going to complain about. I would rather see that than you know, a sticker. So again, I fold it in half. And I just cut out the spine. And again, these you can compost or you know, just throw away. And then I cut into ribbons. Now, if you have herb cutters, you could even just, you know, cut them that way. Now I'm going to add, so I have my olive oil, a little bit more olive oil, just a couple of tablespoons of olive oil. Now you could also use an avocado oil if you wanted to. And I'm going to add my kale, and I'm going to give my kale a toss. So the salad spinner is great because first you have the inside basket where you can soak the kale, and then any residual dirt that may be on there just floats to the bottom. You pick up the basket, you dump out the water, the dirty water, you put the basket back in, you spin it dry. And it's just perfect. All right, now I am, you know, your hands are your best tools, as long as they're clean, you know? So I am tossing my kale in this lemon juice and olive oil and herb mixture. And this will help break down the cells so it's not so chewy. Sometimes raw kale, if ever you've had a raw kale salad and it hasn't been dressed at all, it's chewy. You just chew it, you chew it, you chew it. This way, it's softening. It should be nice and glistened, and we'll just let that sit for a moment. And then now I'm going to wash my hands because they're all full of oil. But this is a bright, simple, easy. You know, take a taste. I'm going to take a taste. So bright and delicious. Now I'm going to go ahead and cut up my Honeycrisp apple. And if you haven't, if you got the bundle and you haven't tried the Honeycrisp apple, take a little taste first. It is delicious. It is so good. And I was surprised at how florally, I know that's not, you're like an apple tastes like flowers, but you know, honey from bees who get their nectar from flowers. So it all, you can really taste it in the apple. So I know this is my Honeycrisp because I put a little H on there. This one I might keep the skins on just to add a little bit of color. And these we just want, again, nice, and we're going to cut these into matchsticks. So I did not cut that one right. All right. So I'm going to make some thin slices. Then once you have one flat side, so these are about 1/4 inch slices. Now we just want matchsticks. So you don't want them so long because this is a salad. You know, you want it to be, you know, maybe just a couple of inches long. And then I'm stacking a couple of pieces and I'm just going to make nice thin sticks. Again, it does not have to be perfect. So here are my nice matchsticks. I'm going to go ahead, toss in my apples. So we have good fiber. We have, a nice dark leafy green. I'm going to add my chopped dates. So we have some sweet, we have some savory with our dressing. We have a little bit of acid, so we have some acidic. Again, that dark leafy greens. I know I have some pretty tongs. Oh, here we go. So some nice salad tongs. You want to toss that because obviously the dates are a little heavy. So you don't want them to come to the bottom. But I love dates. And you have a lot of textures in here too. You have the crunchy apple, you have the soft dates. There we go. And then just a little bit of cheese. Does that sound odd? No, because you think of, an apple pie with cheddar cheese, or you think of, a grilled cheddar and apple cheese, or I like a grilled brie and apple with like a fig jam. That's really good too. So apples and cheese kind of go together. And again, it's just, we're not putting big chunks of cheese in there, just a little bit. But if you do like blue cheese, that would be great in here too. But just a little bit of the pepperoni. It gives it just a nice bite to it. Let's see, what do I have left? Oh, I have 2 minutes left on my cake. Let me check. Oh, it's looking good, but I'm going to leave it in there. Now, again, you can toss this with some toasted almonds, some toasted pecans would be delicious, pecans and apples, walnuts, or you could just keep it, nut-free if you'd like. So, in the meantime, I'm going to plate up a little bit of everything that we created. And if you have little ends of the apples, don't throw it out. You could always make a little bit of applesauce. If you make things like pork chops, you can use those little ends. That would be really nice. To saute with apples and onions. So we have our apple and kale salad. We have that here. Then I know I have a little plate over here. Squash. Ooh, look at our squash. can see that stuff. All right, our squash. Then I'm gonna plate up. Sausages. Oh, with the sauteed apples and onions. Oh my goodness. Of course, you do not want to eat the bay leaf. I highly discourage that. I've got to try and cover all my little letters on my apples. There we go. All right, let me check on this cake. Well, I could go in for a little bit longer, but it does look fantastic. So, oh my goodness, what a night of apples. So we have our beautiful, acorn squash stuffed apples with that bread, that wonderful sourdough boule with herbs and onions and those delicious piney gold apples. We have our mare's meat, fennel sausages with apples and onions. That's delicious. And of course, a little bit of the Nost Hefeweizen in there, or you could use a nice English ale. I wouldn't use anything too dark. But that goes really nice because it has a little bit of fruity citrus notes. It does go really nice with the apples. We have our delicious apple and kale salad with dates and optional, nuts if you wanted to. And then of course, for dessert, we have this apple cake. It's a beautiful dark cinnamon color with your apples and your crumb topping. So it is in less than 2 hours, we made a salad course. We have our vegetable dish. We have our sausages with apples, and we made a dessert, all in the apple theme. So you all should definitely be able to recreate these, and whether it's for yourself, for you and a guest, or for a dinner party. Again, the one-stop shopping, the seasonal roots, for this class was a complete one-stop shopping, and everything else we used were really pantry things. If you didn't have dates, you can use raisins. You could use apricots, dried apricots if you wanted to. So I highly recommend it. Again, I can't speak highly enough. I use it for both work and for home. The eggs we always get excited when we see one egg that we know it has the double yolk, but they are a beautiful orange, and the customer service is fantastic. There have been times, because they are fresh from the farm, there have been times when I've gotten some produce and the next day, like one of the eggplants is just not looking happy. And they respond to me right away. Everything is always really taken care of. So they're a great team of people to work with. So I'm really happy and fortunate that I got that opportunity. But yeah, I welcome everyone to try it out. You have some great recipes. We will be putting, the video will be going, once we do our editing, this video will go out, so if there's anyone who wants to follow it again, we'll certainly be sending that out. But does anyone have any questions before I let you all sit down and eat?
It was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Please be safe this weekend, whatever we may get, tomorrow, Saturday. But yeah, everybody be safe. But if you cook all of this stuff tonight, you'll have plenty of food for the weekend to enjoy,
Thank you.
right?
Thank you
I
so
was
much.
done tonight, maybe not any power tomorrow. So take care, everybody, and thank you so much.